Hello, I'm Clive Paget and I'm the features editor for Musical America. On today's one-to-one, I'm going to be talking to pianist, composer, writer and author Stephen Hough, one of classical music's true Renaissance men. An acclaimed and original artist, Hough is as comfortable discussing religion and art as he is chatting about perfumery, another of the long list of his interests. He resides in London, but he's also a regular visitor to the US, where he is a member of the faculty at the Juilliard School. As the first musician to return to the concert platform last year at London's Wigmore Hall, he's ideally placed to talk about returning to performance, how to move forward, and in what ways the industry might need to change. Hi, Stephen, how are you?
Very well, Clive, thanks. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. You're a man of with many strings to your bow. I just thought we'd start by finding out how things changed for you over the past year, both as a performer and as a recording artist and as a composer.
Well, of course, instantly things started getting struck from my diary. I spent many days erasing concert after concert. I think, oh, I don't know, maybe 60 or something like that just went. So that's one big change. Fortunately, there have been quite a lot of concerts going on in the UK. I was able to play at the Wigmore Hall when they had a series there that opened on June 1st. And in fact, last night I was playing with the Bournemouth Symphony and Sir John Eliot Gardner. We did Brahms 1. Again, it was only streamed, but we were a full orchestra on stage playing some of the greatest music ever written, and it felt wonderful to do that. One thing with my composing that's changed was the time to do it. And this has been absolutely marvelous, I have to say, one of the real pluses of this whole period, because I had 3 commissions from 2019 that were due kind of early 2021, like around now. And I was wondering, how on earth am I going to fit all of this in, traveling? And I used to do things in hotel rooms and backstage, but it was going to be a push because it was a string quartet for the Takash that they wanted for a recording they're doing and a tour. It was the test piece for the Van Cliburn competition that every pianist who enters has to play. And it was a big major song cycle for the 92nd Street Y, the Wigmore Hall, and Tippett Rise. And I finally had time to do this and sit down with my material and revise and think completely outside of all the ideas I had before. And in fact, those 3 pieces are now done and with the publisher and with their various commissioners. So that was great. And I've been able to take on a lot more. So yeah, a big change of gear.
I mean, a lot of things have changed over the last year. I mean, quite apart from the enormous number of things happening online, but I'm kind of curious whether you've noticed any other things changing in parallel to that. I mean, in terms of the kind of repertoire that's being programmed or the musicians who are being asked to do more than just sit in a concert hall and play.
But one thing I think will change will be the length of concerts. And I've written a bit about this. I'm convinced that our old format of just having the 2 hours in the concert hall with a 20-minute interval in the middle will still have that, but I don't think it needs to be the model that we all have every time we go to the concert hall. I think shorter concerts are great. I think it gives people flexibility, not just in programming, but in socializing and in the middle of the week, in just the practicality of childcare. You know, you can actually go to a concert straight from work and then be home by 8:30 having dinner with your family. And I think this is something that we have to look into, or even late night concerts. I think young people might be much more interested in an 11 o'clock 1 hour show, much as they would be in the world of jazz. And all of this, I think we have to look into.
I was very interested in your discussion with the Peabody Institute, where recently you said you had a certain number of things to say about money, and you suggested that some people have been paid too much, for example. What do you think the effect of the pandemic will have been on musicians' income? And I mean, is all the art that we've been offered online for free a good thing?
Well, yeah, I think there are 2 sides to the money question, aren't there? Too little and too much. And let's say that most musicians are certainly not getting paid too much right now. And I think there are people in terribly difficult circumstances, freelancers particularly, people who play instruments in the Mahler Orchestra who've had no chance to play at all for the last year. It's okay if you play a violin, you can play in a quartet and you can play in a small chamber orchestra, but very, very difficult for other people. I think the free content is something that was very understandable right at the beginning of the pandemic because people were suddenly in shock and at home. And in a sense, we were frontline workers. We were working and still are with mental health, where the doctors and nurses were working with physical health. But just as we don't expect our doctors and nurses to be paid nothing for what they do, even if they're doing a humanitarian job, I think the same is true of our musicians. And I really think this is something that has to be addressed. It's something in journalism too, you know, would you pay for a newspaper when you get it free online? Well, it's very tempting, but journalists have to live too, and they have families to feed, and so do musicians. And I think there was a tremendous pressure on musicians in the early months of this pandemic to give content, you know, to play concerts from your home, to stream this, to record that. And of course, no money involved at all. And it was, I spent sometimes whole afternoons recording something that ended up being seen by very few people because there was so much happening and so many streams. And I think we all became rather overwhelmed. And at one point, I just said, I can't do any more. This is doing me in, because it really, you know, it was just, a lot of people, I think, felt, well, what can we do to fill in the time? And, oh, we better do this. And you're a musician. You must love doing what you do. Therefore, yes, give us, play this concert for us free. And there is a place for that. I'm not saying we should never do that. And I think all of us have done charity concerts and benefits and so on. But I think there has to be a readjustment as we come out of this as to what the streaming is and how we pay for it. Last night, for instance, they charged £9 a ticket to watch this concert with Bournemouth Symphony. And that money will go to pay the musicians, of course, to pay me, to pay John Elliott, and the piano tuner. You know, piano tuners need paying. The stagehands need help with that. So the arts is something that I think we need to cherish with our purses as well as with our hearts.
Interestingly, though, I was going to say, interestingly, in your Peabody conversation, you suggested that some people may have been previously paid too much.
Right.
I was curious about what you meant by that and whether you thought that in some ways something was going to change, and if so, how?
Well, this is the other side of the coin, isn't it? Before the pandemic, you know, was our music business in the best health? I think all of us would say, well, maybe not. I think there are organizations that perhaps have been overstaffed sometimes. I've certainly been to places where maybe 4 people are doing a job that maybe 1 person could. Now, that might be something to do with how we work with employment as well. And I don't want to get into deep social or socialist questions on this. But I think there has been a sense, I've felt, that, and this is really since the 80s, working with certain record companies, the idea is if we can just market something right, we can compete with the pop stars, the movie stars. If you wear this particular dress, if you have that particular hairstyle, you know, we can put a 0 on the end of your fee and you're going to be a millionaire and you'll have 10 yachts, not just 1. And I think that there was a sense in which, and I think part of it came from the 3 tenors era, the sense in which we can pump up this music, we downgrade it, we make it more and more accessible, more and more popular, we pay people higher and higher fees. And I just think that's not a good model for us. It's certainly a model that none of the composers that we play most would have recognized. I mean, Beethoven, Chopin, even Rachmaninoff, I mean, he had some nice cars when he was living in Beverly Hills, but even he would have been rather astonished at the idea that he was being paid as much as Clark Gable living down the block. So that's what I meant by, were we paid too much? And in a way, it's a practical consideration, Clive, because what do we do when we come out of here and the money's gone? The governments are having to raise taxes to pay for the money that's been spent during the pandemic. I know certainly in all of these countries with furlough schemes and all kind of compensation schemes, the money has to come from somewhere.
Are you suggesting that Are you suggesting that ticket prices might have to come down to help people who've got less money to go and see things, and therefore artists may need to be paid less?
Well, I'd be very happy if whatever orchestra came to me and said, you know, we've been having a difficult time. We're going to have to lower the price of tickets because we have so many unemployed people who used to be our sponsors can't come anymore. Would you consider a 10% reduction in your fee? I don't think there's any musician who would say, no, I wouldn't. And it's happened before. It happened in 2008 when we had that big recession. Many orchestras, I had a number of orchestras say, we're going to have to do a 50% pay cut.
Mm.
I think all of us said, well, fine. You know, I don't think anyone worth their salt is in the music business just for the money. I mean, you wouldn't do it. You'd go into it's too much work for too little reward if that's what you're after. But on the other hand, just the joy of playing Brahms' First Piano Concerto alone last night isn't quite enough to make me take a bus down to Bournemouth and stay in a youth hostel if they'd let me in, or sleep on a park bench. I mean, there has to be a balance. And I just think it's a point at which perhaps we want to rethink the glamour level of what musicians, classical musicians, came to think of in a way that I don't think they did until the well, you can pluck a figure out of the air, but 70s, 80s.
Asked though, as an international concert pianist, you presumably have travelled far less in this last year than you ever have before. Is that something you expect will happen going forward?
Well, not according to my diary at the moment. I've spoken to a number of colleagues and we're all horrified at our diaries because all of us have said yes to everything because we don't know what's going to be cancelled. I had a concerts in Melbourne in September with the symphony cancelled just a couple of days ago. And that's already quite a bit in the future, September. So next year is going to be either hellish or similar to now with things being cancelled, where we don't quite know. I hate traveling. So I must say that that's the one side of what I do that I like the least. So not packing my suitcase, not going to Heathrow, I haven't missed it at all. But yeah, maybe we have to look into better range tours so that we're not doing the 1 week in Tokyo and then the 1 week in Vienna, that we're actually somehow able to consolidate. And in fact, this is exactly what is going to be happening quite soon. In one place that I'm going, the orchestra is trying to add an extra week after the week that we already had so that I can stay there a bit more, make use of the quarantine that will be involved.
Can I just ask you about live streaming? Live streaming is something which many organisations have had to get very good at relatively quickly. Are you at all concerned that audiences will have become too reliant on the live stream and in some way be reluctant to go back to concert halls?
I think it is a worry, yeah. It's a worry like cinemas have had. You know, if you have a big screen at home and you can watch things on Netflix, then why would you go out to a cinema? And I think we'll just have to see. We have to make sure that our live concerts and what surrounds them. I'm very keen at involving restaurants in this because I think we've missed a trick here. I went to a jazz concert in New York a few years ago in a club there, which served fantastic food. And the evening, it was a wonderful evening. We had a wonderful meal. I was with a friend. I think we got in at 7. We ate the most part of the meal, and then the show was at 8 for an hour, and then at 9 we had dessert, and then we left by 9:30 or something. And it was a fantastic evening. And I think that's something you can't replicate at home. Mm-hmm. You can't replicate being with your friends. And so I think we have to look at the social side of concerts much more carefully. It's not just having a bar in the lobby that has a pathetic selection of crisps and not even a great selection of drinks. Let's have a bar with a wonderful wine selection at competitive prices. You know, let's have places for us to meet with our friends before the concert or after the concert. And spend time. And I think we could have partnerships with restaurants so that you buy one ticket and it gives you the concert and the meal together, and both sides of the equation are benefit from this. We have to be much more imaginative.
Mhm.
I think just bringing out a season after season with our 2 hour concerts with a 20-minute intermission and the same repertoire all the time, it's not going to cut it. I think we have to be more creative about this.
And do you see a real opportunity to make changes in that area or to refocus as we come out of the pandemic? I mean, many things will have changed. Maybe it is a chance for once for people to kind of go, well, we're not going to do things the way we have. Instead, we're going to push forward and make a greater priority in this area or a greater priority in that area.
I think it's true. I mean, many of the things we've talked about now. I mean, this hour-long concert, I think almost everywhere I've done one, they've said, we're going to keep doing this after the pandemic. Wigmore Hall, um, symphony orchestras. You know, the program last night was the Genoveva overture of Schumann, and then the Brahms First Piano Concerto end.
Mhm.
And it felt very satisfying. You didn't need to say, well, what about having a symphony as well? I mean, it's sort of, sometimes if it makes sense, that would be great, but we don't need to pack out our evenings in this way. So I think that's one area that will change. But you know, if you look back to a year ago when this whole pandemic began, imagine that year without the arts, without movies on the television and TV, of course, without concerts, without the interaction we've had, without listening to music, without books. I mean, we would all be absolutely mad. And I think this is, you know, yes, we need our economists and we need all of that side of life. But without the arts, you wonder, well, why are we on the planet at all? What's the point of living unless we have that nourishment? And whatever religious side or not you see to this, it's an ecstasy. It's lifting us out of ourselves. It's contemplation. It's transcendence. And I think we need to get that into the bloodstream of politics too, so that our politicians say, you know, we need to put money into the arts because the arts gives us back more than we could ever give it.
Stephen, thank you so much. That's a wonderfully uplifting ending. And I hope to see you in a concert hall very soon.
Thank you, Clive.